Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's really lovely to see everybody here today. We are going to get started. Everyone can hear all right? I think everyone can hear all right. Okay, so I'm going to just start with a quick video, and then we will introduce the segment.
Growing up here in Toronto, I didn't see this. And now it's embraced, it's celebrated.
It's a fantastic video. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Pavan Wander. I am a teacher, a middle school teacher in the Toronto District School Board. I've worked very much in this community. I actually was a NACI student when I was in grade 9, and now I am sort of working all over the city. So it's a pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to introduce everybody just before we get started with our session today. Sitting to my left here is Rajbinder Grewal, and we will introduce Rajbinder in our session. And to the right of me is Anu Bari. And Anu, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Good morning, everyone. I'm a TDSB teacher as well. I'm currently a K-12 learning coach for continuing education.
Thank you so much. And our session today is Sikh representation in mainstream media. We had a session on this a couple of weeks ago with Rajbinder and another guest, Gurpreet Aluwalia, who was not able to be with us today. But we are very, very grateful that Rajbinder is able to join us today. You might have seen Rajbinder on television. I know I have, or on social media. And we're very, very excited to talk about her work and representation in media, in many different forms of media. So this is going to be a great opportunity for you to think about what representation looks like in the media. Please, if you have any questions, jot them down. We are going to leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session today for us to get some questions from the audience for anybody up here on the panel, or you know, anything that you are thinking about that you'd like to put out there, or anything that wasn't addressed. So that is the session for today. I would like to begin with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and the Inuit peoples. I'd like to give everybody a moment to sit with the land acknowledgement and think about your own connection to the land that we are on today. Thank you so much. All right, so a little bit more about Rajbinder. Rajbinder is a former teacher who now writes for her blog, This Mama Needs a Vacay, a Toronto area digital content creator, and a Cityline Style Expert. She started working in this non-traditional field because she felt that media, both digital and traditional, wasn't showing enough representation of Sikh Canadian women. And this is what our conversation is going to be mostly about today. So hearing from Rajbinder about what her experiences have been like, and what that representation means, especially for young individuals. As I look into the audience, young individuals that may be interested in thinking about what representation in the media looks like.
So Rajbinder, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your journey into the career and where you are today?
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. So it's a very non-traditional field. A bit of my background is that I was born and raised here in Canada, actually. Started off in Toronto and then went over to Mississauga. And I was raised by immigrant parents who tell you what your fields are supposed to be. So I chose teacher because it was the easiest and the most field that resonated the most. So back then, a long time ago, that's what I decided to do. I ended up staying home to be a stay-at-home mom to take care of my kids for about 100 years after that. And then a few years ago, I decided I wanted to do something more. And social media was a space that was growing, and especially in the motherhood community, I would look out, try to lean on it to build community in my experience. But I didn't see mothers who had experiences like mine showing up in that space. First generation child of immigrants, what it was like raising second generation Canadians. So it sort of culminated from there. And social media is quite a fascinating and wonderful place because it's so accessible to all of us. If you have a phone, you have access to social media. And I think everybody is at that place now. So I started off there saying, well, why not me? Why not give this a try? And it started off with travel. So I started off as a travel blogger on This Mama Needs a Vacay. And to be 100% honest, it was because it was safe. Because I could travel and share about that, and I called myself a writer because it had more weight. It meant something. My university degrees weren't going to get wasted. My dad wasn't going to be like, what is it that you're doing? Because I'm still getting that from my dad, even at this age. It was to say, no, I'm a writer. And I am. I'm still a writer. But now I can say, and so when someone asks what you do, I say, I'm an influencer. I used to back off from that word big time. But if you want to say, oh, you're an influencer, yeah, I am. I'm an influencer who gets paid. That's even better. And it's a full-on career. So I've had this journey from writer to digital content creator to influencer. And somehow, earlier this year, back in fall, I was brought on to TV at Cityline by Rogers. And that's been a whole other thing that we can dive into as well. So the evolution has been, as I've slowly allowed the world to see the different elements of who I am, whether it's about travel, writing, motherhood, style, I've used media, both non-traditional and new media, social media, to tell my story and to experiment with whatever it is that I've wanted to share. And the journey is it's unfolding. Every opportunity that comes my way, I just say yes, and I try to figure it out. Like today, I'm like, yes, I will figure it out once I'm here.
That's amazing. And I want to highlight that your journey into media really centers around the idea of story, that you are telling your story. And I feel like when we talk about representation, we don't really get into that storytelling aspect, that the reason that we want to see more representation in the media is because everybody has a unique story to tell. And that story may resonate with so many people that are part of that, are listening to and consuming that story. And I think that is very important. Even teachers and students to think about, we talk about that element, we talk about storytelling so much in school and how it's so important to everything that we do. And this is why. And so I really wanted to thank you for sharing that little bit about being able to tell your story, whether it's through the social media work that you do or through your writing or when you are on television. These are important pieces that all tell a little part of your story.
I believe we all have, every one of us have a story, and it's always evolving. And media, both social media and traditional media, gives opportunity for us to tell our stories, but also importantly, it allows other people to hear our stories. So while we talk about the need for representation, because I didn't see names, and which is what my video showed, I didn't hear a name like Rajbinder Grewal on television before. For school, I always went through, just cut my name down to Raj, because it's easier. Your teacher's not going to mess it up. Back in my day, teachers messed up Rajbinder. I hope they're not doing it now, but back then, they didn't know this name. People know this name now. So I go into a doctor's office and people are saying my name perfectly, which still surprises me to this day, to be honest. And so while I get to go out there and tell my story, and it's people who look like me get to say, oh, I can relate to that. People can say, I see someone who looks like me and I feel heard and seen, but it also really helps people who know nothing about someone who looks like me, who've never experienced a South Asian Canadian woman in their life, someone whose lived experience is very limited and who lives in their community and where they work. To turn on the TV and say, whatever bias I may have had about someone who looked like me, hopefully goes out the door once I start speaking, once I start getting to tell my story and share that. So it works for both showing up for myself and other women like ourselves, but also showing up for those who know nothing about us. So they can learn our story and gain compassion, understanding. It speaks to a bigger picture for those who want to learn. It gives that opportunity to hear our story and learn.
And I think maybe even for the students here, it's really hard to comprehend, what do we mean representation? I walk down the halls and I see so many different faces and colors, but that's not in all of Canada or even Ontario. Like, you go out an hour and you will definitely stick out. So, I think we have to think beyond our school, our community, and so forth.
Thank you so much, Rajbinder. And as we talk about sort of this idea of representation and being in the media, and as Anu mentioned, we walk a little bit outside of our community and we're perhaps not amongst people who look like us and have the same lived experience as us, we may run into some barriers. So whether that's in our jobs, whether we're in university or college and somewhere outside of the city and we don't have that network, that community, we may face some barriers. I imagine you faced a few barriers as you were embarking on your journey, or continue to face barriers now as an experienced person in your field. Could you talk to a little bit about some of the barriers that you have faced as a Sikh woman in your field of work, and perhaps how you dealt with them?
Absolutely. Definitely have faced barriers. I don't think I've recognized them at the time as a barrier, because I sort of look at it and say, well, why not? So one example would be, and I'll talk back to being a digital content creator, social media. I work with lots of different brands who will pay me to produce content for their campaign. And so I had one brand, I believe it was a grocery store chain, a large one. It was last year. It was around Diwali. And they came to me and said, we'd love for you to do this. And I said, that's wonderful. So I am a Sikh. And I don't celebrate Diwali, I celebrate Bandi Chor Divas. And this is what it means, because South Asians are not a monolith. We are so diverse in the language we speak, in our cultural and our beliefs, in our religious beliefs, in the food we eat, in the clothing we wear. We are very, very diverse. But brands are coming and saying, okay, it's Diwali, it's November. We're just going to hit up anyone who is brown and says they're South Asian Canadian to do this campaign. And a lot of people just do it because it's difficult to fight back. I like to fight back. So I went back and said, this is wonderful. I had three words that I asked them to edit in. I said, I will be happy to do this campaign. This is my rate, but I need prior approval that I will be saying Happy Diwali and Bandi Chor Divas. They said no. I said, that's great. See you later. No problem. I'm never going to shop there. I was mad. I was very upset because I took it to heart. It was like, well, how dare you? But then I recognized the agency, the brand, didn't know. And I took the time to write a very long, detailed email, said I'm happy to get on a phone call conversation. And by no means am I the expert or the only sole spokesman for my faith, but I can share what I know if you are willing to learn. They came back this last fall and said, the brand took some time to learn, we've taken some time to learn, and we would love to work with you. And we know that you said you wanted to say Happy Diwali and Bandi Chor Divas, and we'd love to do that. So they paid me and we did it. And the wonderful thing to this one was that they really took the time to understand everything. They didn't ask me to put on certain clothing, to prepare certain food, to have, they did not tokenize that campaign at all, which was something I had said at the beginning as well. So it took them a year to realize, maybe based on my other body of work, and just took the learning. So it was a big barrier, and there's still a lot of brands and who don't touch that. they just won't come close to us. So for Sikh Heritage Month, we were talking about this, which was in April. I'm represented by an agency called Kin Creators. They're my agency. They pitch me, they negotiate my rates, they do all sorts of work for me. And I had said to them, I think back in January, so to pitch me for certain brands for April, I'm happy to give you the bio, the background about why this is important for representation, because I had done pitching on my own in the previous years around Sikh Heritage Month. I have never had a campaign in April. I didn't have any campaigns this April, actually. No campaigns in April, let alone anything to do with Sikh Heritage Month. So this is still a barrier. And it is my goal, as long as I'm doing this work, to get something done with that. I don't know what yet, and I recognize that faith is such a difficult topic, and how to bridge that with the brands will be a challenge, but this is the current barrier that I'm up against. And the whole reason was to, start to talk about my identity. So until I can bridge that part of my identity with my work, and I believe we are so lucky here in this country where we have the recognition for Sikh Heritage Month. Mm-hmm. This doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. This started here in Ontario. And, you have educators like this who create amazing opportunities for us to all learn. And like this panel today and the one we had last month, that it just reminds me that there's so much work to do, and I'm going to continue to work on that. So that's the biggest barrier, is getting brands to recognize we're not a monolith as a community, and that what we are sharing is super important. And it's not just for, the demographic that they think I have. It's not just all, women of color. It's pretty diverse, so.
I want to quickly just talk about that term that you use, monolith. When we are talking about that in terms of South Asian women, India is a subcontinent, and it's made up of many, many different regions. And you may have heard comments like this about Africa, or about certain parts of the world, Asian countries. Everything gets lumped into one. So when we use the term monolith and say that, we're not, Indian people are not a monolith, there are so many languages that are spoken. There are so many different cultures, so many different religions that are represented in that subcontinent that all require and they deserve to be recognized. And so for the students or for those that are watching the recorded version, when we talk about that, we really mean to say that, just to have one person being represented as the Indian person or the brown person, that is something that requires education and requires people to get over that bias of we're all from the same area, and so we all must share the same experiences. We all must share the same language, the same food. We represent the same holidays. And I thank you for bringing that education and that awareness to the brands. And I do want to say that I think that it's a magnificent thing that they took that opportunity to learn, because many brands don't take that. They would just say, okay, well, we'll move on to the next brown person that will do that for us. So I think that's a huge responsibility that you have taken on to continue doing that work. And it's very important. And I think that as a student who might be listening, that might be something that you take on with you as well, that I want to ensure that my experiences that might be different from the person sitting next to me are being accurately represented in the media. So thank you for that.
But also that you took that anger, that why didn't they choose me, or why wouldn't they do this? And you're like, I think you took a step back and said, wait a second, maybe let me educate them. And then that turned out, to reap rewards a year later. So I think sometimes I would be like you. I would be very angry and be like, why aren't they choosing me? Forget them. I'm not going to shop there anymore. But the fact that, you had that maturity to say, wait a second, what can I do to change that? That I think is really important.
And anger is not a bad emotion.
No.
Because if you're fueled to create change and say, you know what? Watch me.
Yes.
Just watch me. If you're going to say no, that's fine. And I've had lots of brands say no. When I work on Cityline, we did the segment that you saw there was for Diwali. And I said yes, but I also said, as I do this style segment, I'm going to be very conscientious to blend in my two identities, which is Punjabi and Canadian. And also is very mindful to try to get clothing and representation on that segment that was going to be diverse for the South Asian continent. It was difficult to do because it's such a short segment. I have 5 minutes to do it. But even with our host, Tracy, for example, we had, styled her in a traditional garment like a sari, which I think everyone thinks of when they think of South Asia, right? In terms of the garments. And that's why I was mindful to choose all the other garments and incorporate them that were not just a sari. And also choosing the fabrics, choosing the kind of embroidery, or I didn't get a chance to explain it for the segment, but in my heart, I knew I was trying to have as much from South Asia represented as possible. So if someone is watching and they're like, that lehenga is made from Banarsi silk, and my mom wears, my grandmother grew up wearing Banarsi silk saris, maybe there's that little bit of seeing yourself reflected in that. And someone else can say, oh, I didn't realize, there's muted colors and bright colors and all these little things. And even my outfit for that, intentionally chosen to be a dress with jewelry because I wanted to show the fusion of our identity. And so it's in all the things. And I have a wonderful producer on the show as well who is South Asian for that segment. And she has a different lived experience because she's from India. But she was like, yes, let's do it. So we worked together to make sure we were trying to bring, within those 5 minutes, which goes by like this, to try to bring as much diversity as possible. And if you ask and say just speak up, you ask and say, this is what I'm going to do, and it's okay to say no. They may say no, and you might say no and walk away, but I do believe what is made for you will come back, and that brands are willing to do the work, and people out there are willing to learn. I do have that positive, attitude about it.
Thank you.
So why do you think this representation of Sikh women or those from marginalized community, why is it important in the mainstream media? And what do we mean by mainstream media?
So mainstream media is, I think traditionally it's been TV, print, not really your generation, but more our generation. We had on TV all the time, and it wasn't just Netflix. We weren't streaming things, so whatever commercials we saw. So growing up, and I think you know as well, the only brown face that was in regular TV, that wasn't my parents' TV shows, that I saw was Monica Diol. She was a host of a daytime show, which was kind of like a day jam, like a club during the day on TV. I know. It was great. She was fantastic at her job. She was a host for that. And I know we'd all watch because we never saw somebody like her. She spoke English the way we spoke English. She was wearing hair and makeup like everybody else, in fashion was. She was hosting a show that was so non-traditional South Asian that it was a big deal to see that representation. But that was sort of it.
And she had her nose pierced.
Yes, yeah, you're right, she did. But we didn't see a whole lot after that for a really long time. We haven't seen people who look like us in mainstream. We open up, if you read a magazine or newspaper, you open it up, and now you can see bylines with names that sound like ours. You can go to the bookstore and you see Rupi Kaur's books making New York Times bestsellers, being banned all over the US, which is amazing because it means something. But you see that name, Kaur. We never saw that. We didn't even use that for most of our childhood coming up because it was so hard to explain to somebody what it means and why we were using it and why every other, Punjabi Sikh girl had that same name as you. But now we're seeing that in all these little places. And it means that, A, you can dream the dream, because if you see it, you can believe in it and you can dream it. And you know it's possible. And it also builds into the fiber of Canadian society, in my opinion. Canada, yes, we're so lucky here in the GTA, especially in the Toronto area, that it's so diverse. And we make up a large population of the country in terms of, all the different elements of it. But our voices have to be projected out for the rest of the country in order for change to happen. And I think we've seen that in the last few years, political climate. If we understand and hear each other's voices and see each other on the news, we see each other sports broadcasting for, hockey night in Canada, not the Leafs anymore, fortunately, but we see that. We see you turn on a sports broadcast to watch, the NBA Finals or about the Raptors, we the North. Then you see like a face like Amrit Gill, for example. She's a young Punjabi Canadian who is, with the MLSC, and she is on TV now in sports broadcasting.
Yeah.
That's huge.
It's big.
I grew up loving and playing basketball. I was really good, by the way. Just joking, I probably wasn't, but and I never thought about a field in sports. The only thing I thought was maybe I can get a university scholarship playing basketball. I actually gave it up before I even got to university, which another thing. But I never saw that. Oh, I love sports, and I'm a decent public speaker. I could have done that path because there's no brown women or women really in sports. We're starting to see that now. So that's a dream that you could dream, but we didn't see that before.
Well, the WNBA were here on the weekend, and that was sold out.
Huge. Because the dream that, 15-year-old me had is if I wanted to play basketball, I'd have to somehow make it to the NBA and learn to dunk before I got there. That wasn't going to happen. Or play for Team Canada for the Olympics, right? You never thought that you could be a professional, basketball player in an amazing league like the WNBA. So, and there's so many girls and women out there who can do this, who can dream outside that usual box of what we're taught that we're allowed to do. And if you're from a marginalized community, for example, you're taught there's certain things that you can do, and that's it. But it doesn't then foster the other things that you might be passionate about doing or you want to explore because you're put in a box. Mm-hmm. Because you can't see it and nobody else can see it.
Right.
So it sort of limits us all. So that's why I think seeing ourselves reflected and amplifying each other's voices, supporting each other's voices and stories, hearing them, letting us tell them, it just allows us all to grow.
Right, and you touched on an important piece of having someone to look up to model yourself after. And now that we're seeing more people in different fields, including media, there's a path for that. And I know that that's something that we talked about last time as well, that you offer that support for people for young girls or for people who are thinking about entering the field, but really don't have anyone to model their careers after or know the right person to even talk to ask those questions. What was it like for you to break through that glass ceiling or, to be able to enter a field where nobody that looks like you has ever been in. So even having somebody there to be able to go to ask those questions, I think is such an important thing. And I think it's important work that you do as well to offer your help in assisting people to enter that field. And so let's go into another topic that sort of happens not just in media, but in many different industries, including in education, this idea of tokenism. And do you feel that there is sort of, maybe tell us a little bit about what that term tokenism means to you, and what it might mean in your industry, and if you've ever experienced it, and what does it look like in media?
So tokenism, I believe, is it's very surface level. We're saying, oh, we want representation and diversity, but just so we can have a stamp and say, look, we're doing our part. It's not understanding the complex nature, the complex identities that we each carry. And knowing that, again, like we talked about not being a monolith, it ties in with that as well. It's not just checking something off, it's understanding what an individual and a community actually brings, the full nuances of it all. It's so multi-layered. Just like I think a Canadian identity is. If we were to define what is a Canadian, just look in this room, right? And I think with tokenism, especially in my field of work, going right back to digital content creation and digital media, brand work, it's very prevalent. I've had the opportunity to work with amazing brands like Estee Lauder, Shell, Clinique, a few others. Of course, I'm blanking now. And these brands I've had wonderful relationships with them. And there's a lot of brands and the PR agencies that represent them that will have a campaign and they're trying to put it together. And I'm not in those rooms, so I don't know what words are said. But when I look at it from the outside, or when I'm evaluating campaigns that I'm seeing in my, community of women in the GTA who are doing them, I can very easily say, they needed a woman of color, so they have one black content creator. They threw it in for a mix and they have one brown mom. They have one male. I mean, it's a female-dominated industry, so that's not too unsurprising. But you can see when the tokenism comes into play, because there's often room just for one. And there's that scarcity mindset as well. And I was in New York talking at another panel this weekend where it was a room full of 60 plus panelists, all South Asian backgrounds, different careers, and it was phenomenal. And we talked about it there too. The scarcity mindset is where you think, well, this, I really want to work with Estee Lauder, but they're only going to hire one brown woman. I need it to be me. So I'm going to trip that girl beside me. I'm not going to put her name in that room. But that's not what's working. That has not been my experience. I have some amazing brands who are bringing us all in. I have other women who are holding that door open and letting me walk in first. I'm hoping I'm doing that for them too. I'm mindful about that. So I think tokenism, while it exists, there's a lot of work being done where we are trying to bring others with us. So it's not just token. We are saying you're invited to an event. So, I mean, sometimes you see influencers go to these really cool events and stuff. And, if I get an invite to something, I'm like, thank you so much. Can I bring a plus one? Not my husband, not my kids. Can I bring somebody else who I think will be wonderful for this brand to know about? Another, usually woman of color. And they often say yes. And that's how I have a partnership with LG. And that's how that partnership came to be. Because I had a friend who also works in media. Her name is Tina Singh, so she's a social media content creator. She brought me to an event and opened that door up for me. And that allows brands to say, we see the support in community, and some brands are happy to say there's room for all of you based on the merit of your work. And then there's some brands that still say, okay, well, we just need one brown woman. We need one woman of color. Forget, if it's black or brown. We just need the one. We can have multiple of what they may consider as mainstream Canadian. So there's a lot of that when it comes to the tokenism for social media content creation. And when it comes to mainstream media, I think it's starting to change depending on what network it is and who's in charge, to be honest with you. And I'm going to be 100% honest, that scarcity mindset, I've had it happen when I wanted to say no to doing a segment for Cityline because I was tired, or I knew it was going to be a lot of work that month and I didn't know if it was going to be smart to do economically. And I thought to myself, if I say no, they're going to get somebody else. They're going to get another brown stylist. But also in my mind, I think to myself, well, why not? If I can't do it, I should be giving you a name of at least 5 others who might do a better job than me. But maybe we can both do it at the same time. I don't know, and truthfully, I don't know if there is enough room being made for all of us, but I have to do my part to try to make that room. And if it means I'm losing out on work, I'm losing out on work. That's okay.
But I think you're building that community, and people know, oh, if I work with you, I know there's going to be that collegiality, and I think that's in any industry, wherever you go. I think we see it in education, we see it in the business world, the corporate world. They say there's that glass ceiling, there's only so high you can go. But if we don't help each other, then we're just pitted against each other. And that's where the competition is, and everyone, they're just like, oh, well, let them work it out, instead of maybe we need to have more seats. Let's bring in more chairs. So I'm really glad you're doing that.
And there's a quote that Rupi Kaur has from one of her books. I don't remember the full one, but she talks about that we're so starved that when we finally get a seat at the table, we're taking that seat, we're buckling ourselves in, we're grabbing onto that table. But you know what? And men do this all the time. And we can move our chair, we can make a bigger table, we can bring more seats. We can share our chair. We can sit on it halfway and share it with somebody else. We can make room. And as we make room, the table just gets bigger and bigger. And there is more for everyone else to have as well.
Or as Lily Singh says, make a new table.
Yeah. Make a new table.
And that really serves everyone when we make a new table. It's not just good for the people that are sitting at the table, but it's good for everybody else who is around the table as well.
So do you think the fashion industry in Canada is becoming more inclusive and diverse? And where do you still think there needs to be areas of growth? Like, I'm just sitting there and I can see the Elle and the fashion magazines on the rack there. And I'm like, I wonder who's on the cover over there.
And I think that goes back to tokenism at times too, right? I don't think it's as diverse as it can be. I don't think that credit is given to some communities where fashion begins. And I know, within Black creators on TikTok, I think, there was a big movement in the last year where we are recognizing that TikTok dances and creation was started because of these young Black women who were on there. They were not getting paid. They're not getting credit for anything. Same thing happens with fashion. And we don't give credit to that in the first place. So then when we see it filter into something mainstream, and we see it when you see it on the fashion runways, we're not getting credit to where it originated from. We're not seeing those faces on the cover of magazines, representing those brands at fashion weeks, for example, going to those, PR events at different places. I really do believe I see a lot of tokenism, and that's just my experience. And sometimes it's my hurt feeling that way too, that I'm like, I am not seeing other brown stylists invited to certain events or giving credit for what they are doing. And when it comes to modeling as well, you see what faces. Diversity is still lacking, whether it's body diversity, age is another big one as well. And from all the different communities, Black, Indigenous, Asian, all the diversities that make that up as well. So I think we have a long, long way to go. A long way to go. And it's about, in fashion too, it filters back down to when you go into a store or you're online and we're shopping, where are these stores, where are these clothes, where's everything being made? Who's the face of this brand and who gets to showcase it? But there's some wins. So Money Jessel is a, Canadian South Asian designer. She went to TMU, which was Ryerson, for fashion. She has a boutique. She showed at Toronto Fashion Week a few times. In this past November for Diwali, she had a temporary display, or actually place to sell at Holt Renfrew. Right. So Holt Renfrew is huge worldwide for luxury fashion, and that was a really big deal to walk in there and see it. And they did something for Eid as well. They had a marketplace, and they had a few things representing for that as well. So I can see that they're a huge Canadian leader in fashion, and they are trying to make change. So I see that happening, which is remarkable, right? So it's happening, but I still think it's a little bit slow compared to where I saw it when I was growing up and where I am now. Yeah, it's happening slowly.
And maybe not waiting for those special days or that's Diwali or Eid or whatever. It's just out there.
Right.
Just carry Money Jessel bustiers on a regular basis. Yep. Everybody can wear them when you go to the club. No, I'm joking.
Well, it could be now. Something that you touched on that I wanted to explore a little bit more about is this idea of appropriation. And so when we don't give credit to our inspirations, and we see this a lot in the fashion industry in many different areas, hair, makeup, clothing, everywhere. there are concepts and ideas that are taken from different cultures, and that the credit is not given to the creators. And so that sort of sparked something. And when we're talking about tokenism, yes, we bring on that one person to talk about that. But what happens when even that creator or that culture isn't even brought into the picture? Especially in fashion, so much, and you see it in news all the time, the creators or the designers are borrowing from different cultures without giving that credit. Did you want to, I know it's kind of going off a little bit, but did you want to speak a little bit about that and what that means in the fashion industry or any sort of media industry at all?
Absolutely. So we look at Coachella, for example. And for a long time, the aesthetic for Coachella was wearing bindis and henna tattoos, it's called. And so much of that is appropriated from South Asian cultures. And not just South Asian, with henna, whether you call it mehndi or whether you call it henna, the cultural importance of it and the significance amongst so many South Asian cultures into the Middle East as well is never fully explained. And then you have brands that commodify yoga and the gear and the words that they use to call, their pants, for example. I think some of that is starting to change because there is getting that backlash. But they are not bringing on people in that field who are experts from that background, for example, to help educate and learn from them. Right? They're just taking what they want. I do see that even in beauty. So Ayurveda is having a big moment, and I'm calling it a trend right now, even though it's been around for centuries, right? Yeah, it's been around for so long that now there are brands, and thankfully there's a lot of South Asian Canadian brands, which are amazing, who are Ayurvedic brands who are starting to get attention and making their mark. But it'll be interesting in the next year or two to see what other mainstream brands co-opt Ayurvedic practices, right? So we've seen it with yoga, we've seen it with different fashion when it comes to Coachella. And then, in a bigger picture too, we've seen it with hip hop over the decades and music and Black culture being appropriated by mainstream culture, by everybody, right? And no credit being given to that ever. For money. And we've seen it by a certain celebrity family of women and how they've changed their bodies to be more in line with what what many Black women, for example, or Latinx women have with their natural bodies. But they're not allowed to go to work looking like that. They have to change themselves, but yet someone else can commodify it and make billions of dollars off of it, off of other people's backs. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that. And I think it's important, speaking as a South Asian Punjabi, that I recognize my role in that. Sure, there are going to be parts of my culture and my background that are going to be commodified and people are going to be taking from, and yes, I can speak up to that directly. And, there are times that I might, but I also have to be careful about my role in that and being not complicit. Yes, I listen to 80s and 90s hip hop, but understanding where that music comes from and the history of it. It's all on internet, it's Google, Wikipedia. We can all learn like this. We don't have any more excuses to not learn and to understand where it came from. That's it. Within yourself, just have that understanding to say, absolutely go use that Ayurvedic face mask, but just maybe read on that website. What does it mean? Why are these ingredients used in this? It takes, honestly, 2 minutes. We consume so much on a daily basis. We're looking at, short form video all the time that we can stop and learn about that too.
Right.
And a big thing right now, also another, I think, trend is hair oiling. Yeah. I know you guys grew up with it, and I haven't spoken up on it online, but I am seeing other creators in my space who are not South Asian who are sharing about it. And I saw one and I was going to say, and I have to decide if it's worth me speaking up and saying, that sucks. Like give some credit to where it came from. Learn before you're sharing it on your platform. Or do I just quietly use my platform and share about it,
Right.
coming from a South Asian. So it's there. It's about how you choose to speak up and take up that space.
It's the responsibility with
Yeah.
it. I think as a content creator, there is a certain responsibility of
think so.
knowing where your inspirations come from and acknowledging that,
Yeah.
acknowledging where you are on your own learning journey, and then also sharing that knowledge for others as well. And I do see it happening more on social media. Especially with music, people sharing where the inspiration of the music has come from in different mixes, and even in terms of fashion. It is happening. It's happening slowly, and I think that it will continue to happen, which is, I think, the most important thing. I think that we're ready for our last sort of question of the conversation before we take it to questions from the audience. So if you are thinking about something that you would like to ask any of us, please be ready with that for next. So the last question that we're going to talk about is, as a society, what can we do to bring more diversity and representation into the fashion and lifestyle industry, or into other fields that are underrepresented?
Make space. I think the biggest thing is to make space for each other. Hold that door open. Let someone else go in before you. Take them in with you. There is so much opportunity, especially with growing social media and the access that it has, that there really is room for everybody, every identity, every story to be told. We just have to make room. And then when you're seeing something, I know we don't really do this, like it, just give that heart to that creator, especially if it's somebody who is underrepresented. Share it with somebody, even if you don't want to have that digital footprint by showing that share it with somebody. Those sort of metrics speak volumes. You don't even have to buy that product. You can just share it and watch the video, or put an emoji or something if you don't want to write anything. But it's showing support in that way, which I think is for all of us that we can do. And I'm assuming all of us are on social media, that we can do when we're consuming it. And when we have those opportunities to take someone else with us, to speak other people's names in those rooms as well, and to listen, actively listen in the stories, and recognize that we all have a part of this. There's just so much opportunity and room. I really believe that we can all, it's a really big pie. It's a really big pie, and you can make more pies, so we can all get a slice of that pie. I believe that. There's no, that scarcity mentality that I know so many immigrant families grew up with here. I think that needs to start changing, and women as well have that scarcity mentality, but you can make more. There's so much more to make and consume and share. Yeah.
And media is such a growing field. So if, as students, you're thinking about entering this field of media, we were just talking about this before our session began today, that there's so many aspects of the media industry that are changing and growing by the minute. So there are different aspects to it that we haven't even considered are going to be happening. So the deeper that we get into it, and I know as myself, as an active podcaster and in sort of this area of media content creation myself, there are new things that I'm learning about, new challenges to explore, and new barriers to overcome. And so the more we do this together, the better it is for everybody that's involved, and for the next generation that's coming after us. So it is a growing field. It is a great field to get into, whatever part of media, the media industry you're interested in. And it's something that is definitely a great opportunity. So thank you for your answers, Rajbinder. And we are going to open up to the audience if you'd like to ask any questions at this time. There is a microphone that's set up on the wall by the wall. So if you would like to ask, you're welcome to ask from where you are, or you can go up to the microphone and speak there.
So then maybe what are some of the skills that you've had to use, or you see other people using, to get into, whether it's media or any other field? What are some skills that are very important that perhaps our students are like, well, we're learning about this, but I'm not going to use this skill?
So the boring one is math. which is not my strong suit either. But when it comes to like business math, you need to be able to know how to manage your money. You need to be able to know how to value your work so you can ask for your rate. So if you're, you have a part-time job, as a student, you're probably getting paid a minimum wage, but you have the basics of knowing how much you're going to earn that week, that month, and then how much money you actually have that you can go out and spend. So, when we're talking about math and taxes and all that kind of stuff, that is relevant when we all become adults and work. Communication. So English class might not be your thing. I actually used to teach it, so I loved it. Is communication. So learning to write. So not so much on some of the newer digital platforms, but like for Instagram, learning to write a caption was really important. But beyond that, learning how to write an email. Whether you're pitching yourself to a brand, whether you're responding to them, whether you're negotiating a contract, learning to communicate is very, very key. And then that communication, not just the written format. So when you're watching a TikTok video and there's somebody who's really good at what they're saying and convincing you of whatever it is that they're sharing, to see how they're communicating that, because they're public speaking. I mean, it's just a camera, but they're speaking to somebody, it could be a huge audience, and how are they communicating their thoughts? How are they getting their point across? And then this whole new field, which I don't think we had growing up, about podcasting, about creating content, video content, photography, editing, sound editing. It's, makeup. So I've worked on campaigns where we've had makeup artists who work in film and media, and that is their full-time job. Right. They loved beauty. So she or they would learn more about beauty and just experiment with their friends and just grow and grow and grow. And then that's wonderful. They're so talented. Well, how are they going to work on movie sets or TV sets or, for a campaign with a big brand? Well, they need to know how to market themselves. They need to know how to reach out. They need to know how to use LinkedIn, for example, all that sort of stuff. So there's so many elements of whatever you like to do at school, do it, learn it, and then it can be applied to, I think, anything you choose to do.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely, in terms of media, so many transferable skills. And oftentimes, when I'm working with students, it's the thing that you think is not going to be useful that becomes the most useful when you're in the industry. And so we talk to students a lot about exploring your passions, but also then connecting those passions to what you're doing in school. So if you love video content creation, you've got a great active TikTok channel, let's say, for example, or you're on Instagram. How can you bring that media content or what you are doing into school? And then conversely, when you're out in the working field, how can you use what you have learned in school to be applicable in that industry? And I think that is where the magic really happens. And so, yes, thank you for sharing all of those definitely useful skills. They are definitely going to come in handy when you are in the industry. And thank you for highlighting those for us.
And I think now it's really exciting because there are so many post-secondary programs, whether it's college, whether it's university, that help teach you about this entire growing industry. It is growing at a pace that we can't even understand. With AI and everything else, it's like warp speed is how the growth is happening. And so education is there to help support it. I've been looking at some programs for my daughter as well. There is so much. So if that's something of interest outside of accounting, math is all very boring. Creative fields, there are universities, OCAD, TMU, that actually every single university has something dedicated towards it now in terms of programs, and colleges too. There's just a lot for you to learn, both in your day-to-day at school and then to think about your bigger picture maybe. Yeah.
Amazing.
I think it's a good place to end off.
Yes, I think that we are good. And we want to say thank you so much, Rajbinder, for a wonderful experience today. I've learned so much in the many conversations that we have had together, and I hope that the audience has taken away some wonderful things as well. So thank you once again on behalf of the Sikh Heritage Committee, as part of the Toronto District School Board, for being here with us today to have this conversation.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening.